Today we are very honored to have with us Russell Pearce, who is a state senator from District 18 and the president of the Senate. Russell has been around a long time. He's a fifth-generation Arizonan and has had numerous positions, and we'll get into that in a minute in his background. Obviously, Russell is in the press a lot, and welcome to the show, and we're pleased to have you.
Dennis, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm always love to be here. Love to talk to the public. Good grief. Isn't it nice that once in a while you can get the truth out?
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to do in this hour, I hope. And you have been, of course, as we understand, a lightning rod for a lot of people who want to take out on you, it seems to me, a lot of their frustration with the law. And let's get right into it. First, I would like to educate some of the listeners, though, Russell, if you don't mind, about your background, because you have a fascinating background that a lot of people don't know or realize. So if you take a minute first before we get into the issues and talk about who you are.
Well, again, I'm Russell Pearce, born and raised in Mesa. I'm one of 13 children, blended family. My wife's one of 7. We tease about it a little bit. We have about 100 nephews and nieces between us. They all vote.
I was going to say, I think you would say 100 yeah. Children. That would be a real feat. Yeah,
really.
Okay.
Yeah, even at my
you have 5 children, right?
5 children, 14 grandchildren. But when we do see, as I said, we have about 100 nephews and nieces between us. We do check their registration, make sure they vote. That's how I'm able to stay in office.
Right. And that they're legal.
And they're all legal. And they're all card-carrying Americans.
Right.
They love this republic, and we take time to teach our children about the founding principles of this wonderful country.
Now, you grew up as I understand, in a very poor household, and worked your way up. And my understanding is you wanted to be a doctor at one point in time. Is that true?
It is true. All my high school career, I dreamed about being able to go to med school. But when you're a poor boy, and we were very poor. I can define poor for folks. We lived in houses that were condemned. We lived in 8 different houses just on South McDonald. We used to tease my dad about they're wanting rent again. My dad was an alcoholic. We loved him. My dad was an alcoholic, and my mom raised him and us kids. So we were very poor. I sold mistletoe downtown Mesa, ran around Mesa barefooted, sold papers downtown. My favorite place was the Green Frog. 3 or 4 beers, I'll buy 2 papers from you. Especially when you're a little tiny kid. Looks like you always need a haircut.
Right.
And
those days are gone.
Those days are gone. But you know what? I have no complaint. My mom, as I've said many, many times, was a saint. My mom was such a wonderful, wonderful lady. And it's not any of us children that don't agree. She was killed in a car accident up in Utah a few years ago, and that was really hard because my grandchildren don't get to visit with their great grandmother, and my children missed her. So you always were, that's sad. But she was a wonderful lady. I never remember going to bed that she wasn't up working, and I don't remember getting up that she wasn't already up working and doing things. My mom was a worker, and she taught us good values.
Well, you're a worker too. As I understand it, you work very, very hard late tonight, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And you know what? And I get that. I think that work ethic from my mom. Same with my values. Very first fist fight I had as a young man, I think I was in first grade, and it was with my next door neighbor. It was over Eisenhower and Stevenson. I can
only guess who you were supporting.
And I don't even know that I knew anything but the name. But I knew my mom liked him, and that meant he was the best guy.
I just read something about Eisenhower that sticks with me that I thought was interesting. There was something about Barry Goldwater, and what it was, Russell, was somebody, I think it was Gary Hart, wrote Goldwater a long-winded memo on something. And Goldwater wrote him back and said, you know what, I'm not going to read this memo, it's too long. The one thing that Eisenhower told me that I remember that stuck with me, he said, that I thought was the best advice he ever gave me was, if you can't say it in one page, don't bother saying it at all, because you got nothing to say.
Well, that's the nice thing about being short and succinct.
Right.
But, I appreciate that. I have a great love, and I do get scoured on a regular basis by the left. I don't know why a guy's a bad guy for standing up for the rule of law. I don't know why. I do know why, unfortunately, because they're after not only cheap labor, but cheap votes, and they want to change the political makeup of America.
Let's get into that. I was going to ask you that, but while you're on that, it just shocks me sometimes as to you're a complete lightning rod, and of course I appreciate that. But why? I mean, I don't intellectually or otherwise understand it. I mean, I guess I do understand it, like you said. There's a certain position or block of people that are just rabid on certain points. But what I don't get is, and maybe you can help educate me on this, your position is not a racist position. Your position, as I understand it, is anything but a racist position. You're saying, look, you got to be in the country legally, bottom line, to make it real simple, right? That's it. And if you're not here legally, then you got to go home and figure a way to get here legally, right? That's your basic position.
Well, it is. And first
why
of
does
all,
that offend people?
I don't know. First of all, the most generous nation in the world. We allow more people legally in the United States than all the other developed nations combined.
Yeah.
But you have to have a permission slip. Just like you have to have permission to come into my home, you have to have permission to enter my country. And here's what we ignore.
Well, can I enter Mexico without any documentation and expect to be treated well there?
They don't know how to spell civil rights.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You know,
So I don't get it.
It'd be tough. You know what? Here's what's sad though. During the debate, let's take 1070 for example. And again, I'm not a hateful guy. I don't know of anybody I hate. In fact, my son
Well, I got a few
was
for
shot.
you, but
My son was shot by an illegal alien. I have 2 boys in law enforcement.
Yeah, I
I
heard
spent
that.
my career in law enforcement. Well, I don't hate that young man that shot him. A bad guy, wanted on homicide charges, involved in drug trafficking. He's a bad guy. And that was before he shot my son, wanted on those charges. And my son almost died in that gun battle, you know. In fact, that's an interesting story. I'll be quick about it. But I was standing at the podium, literally at the podium, giving a speaking on this very issue, Brookings Institute in D.C., when I was in 04, and I was handed a note from home. It said, emergency, ASAP, call home. Immediately, wow, I'm thinking, grandchild. The first thing that went through my mind is I've got a grandchild, swimming pool accident, car accident. You know, I knew it was something serious.
So you were already on this issue then, because a lot of people have said that's what galvanized you into this whole immigration issue. You're already on that.
I was on that issue.
Okay, well, that's important.
I was speaking about that at 04. I've been on this for over 25 years.
Okay.
Over a quarter of a century. But anyway, when I was speaking and standing at that podium, had that note, I stepped off and I grabbed the phone, called home, and says, Sean's been shot. I don't know how bad. He's being air vac to a local hospital, Russell. I'll call you back when I get more information. I'm headed to the hospital now. Sheriff's office picked her up, was taking her. And so when I was arranging a plane home, I called back about an hour later, and we get a phone. And she said, you're not going to believe this. It's going to make you mad, Russell. He was shot by an illegal alien. I said, you know, man, it doesn't make me mad that he was shot by an illegal alien. Not at the young man anyway. He's a bad guy. He was wounded also. Not life-threatening, I understand, but he was in the hospital. I said, you know what I'm really upset with? My government. That should have never happened.
Right. Well, that's right. That's what it's all about, really. And unfortunately, there are a percentage of people who are crossing the border. They aren't just here for good reasons. I was in court the other day. Some guy was sneaking over to help his little girl up here to pay for her. He's a baker and so forth. He was put away for about 2 years. That's a sad story. He's obviously not a criminal. But there are a percentage of people that come across that are, and that's the problem.
3 out of 10 have felony or criminal convictions already crossed this border today. You've got the gangbangers. You've got the largest, most violent gangs in America made up of illegal aliens. You've got the drug smugglers, the human smugglers, the child molesters. These are not the same. In fact, I've got so many stories. But
we're going to take a break in a minute, but if you can just wrap up, that would be great.
During the debate of 1070, a good friend of mine, and he was a friend, Bob Kretz, was murdered on the border. You know, and what a shame. I know Sue, and I've been down the riding horseback with Sue on occasion on that border. So anyway, after he was murdered, and during that debate, I had all the rangers come up from Sassabee to Douglas, the span of that entire border. I wanted them to tell their story, because they were telling me, and have told me in many cases, not the same as used to be.
Yeah. And
they admit they've had trespassers for years. Some have even hired them. But they told their stories one after the other and said, oh, so it's not the same.
Yes.
Just before committee, they said, our dogs' throats are cut, our animals are slaughtered, our fences are torn down, our water lines are destroyed, our homes are invaded. Some of them board their windows and their doors like they did in the 1800s. They hear noise at night, they pray for daylight.
Well, look what's going on in Mexico itself. It's no surprise. Well, we're going to continue on with this conversation with Russell Pearce, President of the State Senate, in a few minutes after these messages. So we'll be back shortly. Hang on, and we'll continue this conversation. We're back with Russell Pearce, President of the State Senate. This is Dennis Wilenchik on KFNX, 1100 News Talk Radio. And Russell was just talking to us about the immigration issue, and we were trying to figure out here together why he's such a lightning rod on this issue and why people take it so personally. Russell, why don't, in that regard, let me ask you, obviously it's on a lot of people's minds, this recall effort. Let me start with this. As far as I know, you're the only legislator now to even have a recall that at least is successful in the sense that it's going to go forward, which tells me a lot. Why are you such a lightning rod for these issues?
Well, let me clarify something. It may or may not go forward because they've not followed the law or the Constitution. Not that the courts have ever allowed that to get in the way.
Exactly.
But
well, you did file something in court on this, right? What's the status of that?
Well, we'll have our hearing Monday, and then it'll go to Supreme Court either way, and they'll hear it, I understand, August 31st.
Okay.
We should prevail. We have case law, the law, and the Constitution on our side. Hopefully the judges...
And what's your argument in a nutshell as to why this recall should not go forward legally?
Well, they didn't follow the law. There's several issues involved. First of all, there were several hundred folks who signed the petition who live outside of my district, and you have to be registered electorate inside that district, qualified to elect, to vote in that district. So you can't be from Glendale to Scottsdale to Chandler and sign, and they had several hundred of those. Then they also had, you have to, by Constitution, that you have to guarantee the signatures are genuine. We have many, many petitions where we have folks who sign for other folks, or it's not their signature. And that invalidates the entire petition because you violated your oath to guarantee that signature is genuine, so you can't guarantee any of the others when you can't guarantee that one. And so there's a lot of issues.
So you have enough questionable signatures already to question the validity of the recall?
Well, if they uphold the law, and there was a debate around the genuineness, and people want to debate that.
Right.
During the Constitution, there was debate why that was a higher standard than a referendum and an initiative, because you're letting the minority overturn the majority. Because this is...
I'm
elected.
Undo an election.
And this is undoing an election, you're right. And it's an abuse of the process because they're undoing the election based on what I was elected on. This isn't because I've done anything immoral and improper. This is because they disagree with me.
Well, that's what's so bizarre about it.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have elections every 2 years. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to run.
And it seems to me and the people I've talked to to be an incredible waste of money on people's minds. In fact, people have written in that why are we wasting money on this? As you said, there's a process for this. If you disagree with the guy, then vote him out of office. That's the way it works in this country.
And I'm 16 and 0 counting primaries in my district. They know me, like I said.
What does that mean, 16 and 0?
Well, I've been elected 16, counting primaries and generals together. The vote, I've won those 16 elections.
Do you have the support in your mind of the people in your district?
Yeah, I do in my mind. I mean, and again, special elections.
So who's behind this?
It's kind of interesting. It's out-of-district folks. They're not even a member of my district. One is Randy Pearce, who's the former AFL-CIO boss. He's pro-gay marriage. He's anti-1070. He's helped orchestrate some of the protests at the Capitol.
That's the guy that ran for Senate?
Yeah, a failed Democrat Senate candidate. And he's going to determine who should be elected in LD 18, what Republicans should hold that office. He's never supported me. His group has never supported me. They're the extreme left, and again,
when is this hearing
Mary Rose Wilcox and all these folks that protest in Maricopa County every day, they're part of that group.
When is this hearing?
Well, the hearing, the first hearing will be, like, say, Monday. And then
in Superior Court?
In Superior Court, the trial court level. And then it'll be appealed. Whatever side wins or loses.
You know which judge is hearing it?
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm trying to
remember.
But we did draw a Democrat judge, but he's fairly moderate. I'm hoping.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see, and we'll hopefully see how that comes out for you. And so, basically, because recalls are very rare, this is sort of unprecedented, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they paid for signatures. They weren't volunteers. And you can't believe some of the stories of it. I've had folks call me, say, Russell, the recall people call me and thank me for signing. I never signed. I've never signed anything.
Yeah.
You're really upset. And others have said, I signed to reinstate access. I had no idea this was a recall. Because if you read which is another issue on the top, it very clearly has to state the purpose of a recall in there. And it failed to do that in the one piece. So you'd think it was a resolution more than a recall if you read that. So
well, let me ask you this before we turn to the next topic.
Not everybody. I mean,
yeah, of course. But let's discuss. We obviously understand some of the motives behind that, but from your standpoint, do they have to state a basis for the recall? I mean, what's the basis of it?
According to the Constitution, they do have to state a basis.
So what's the basis that they're claiming?
Well,
do they have one?
No, not really. I mean, other than they disagree. They said that.
Yeah, we understand they disagree with you.
They want a more gentle Senate, as if I'm not. Every Republican senator but two signed a letter that said I'm one of the best leaders they've ever worked with and most effective. We got a balanced budget out during a tough time. We could teach Washington a few things. We know how to balance a budget. We stopped reckless spending. We didn't increase our no bonding, no debt, no gimmicks, no games, no rollovers. We an honest, balanced budget in less than 100 days, and then we concluded business well. We had some major reform policies that we took on this year too. We did a lot of good stuff this year for the people of Arizona, and I always put Arizona first in this Constitution.
So they have no basis, in other words, that they've stated.
No, they disagree. They disagree with SB 1070. They disagree with. That's really what it amounts to. These again, the folks involved in advocating and facilitating these protests around.
Right.
This
and let me ask you this: how does this work now? Assume, for the sake of argument, that they succeed and the court rules against you and it proceeds. Do you have any idea how this works? Because quite frankly, I don't know how this would work.
If the courts rule against me, there's a very short time frame, because the last day for going to printer to get those ballots ready is about September 20th. Mm-hmm. So the Supreme Court has agreed to take this August 31st. So they will have to have a quick turnaround, and within,
The Supreme Court's already agreed to look at it.
They've already agreed.
Regardless of what the decision is.
You're right.
Okay.
Because they're gone, they'll be back. So the first day they can hear it is August 31st.
In order to get the pamphlets out, if in fact it goes forward.
Because there's a drop dead date.
And then when would there be an election?
November 8th.
And that election would be in your district?
In my district only.
And do you have any reason to believe, again, by polling or whatever, that they have any traction in your district?
I have a strong base.
That's what I would think.
So
it's a big waste of time, probably.
Well, special elections, that's a big shot. This is for one, the one candidate running, clearly, who advocates, who professes to be a conservative Republican. He's joined hands with the Democrats to go around the process our founders set up and to ignore the primary process. The reason we have primaries is so parties, it's not a real election, it's a nomination. That's where the parties nominate their candidate to stand for an election in the general. He's decided to blow off the Republicans. The Democrats have already said they're his candidate. He's their candidate. They intend to support him. The open border, pro-abortion, libertarians have,
Who's he that you're referring to?
Jerry Lewis.
Oh.
And
but now there's another guy that's popped up, right?
Yeah, two.
Two.
An independent and then a Hispanic Republican. I can't remember her name, but conservative. I understand, probably a nice lady.
Let me get to this. Why do you do this? I'm just curious. I mean, listening to this.
That's the toughest question you'd ever ask.
I'm glad you do, but why do you do this?
Dennis, and I'll try to be brief.
Yeah, that's
I never intended to run for office. I had aspirations someday to run for sheriff, but I never really wanted to be the candidate. I've always supported good candidates. I've worked hard for them, good conservatives, those that understand the founding principles and have their moral compass in place. I've always worked hard for candidates. I've been a good Republican, my whole life.
Well, why would you want to put up with all this?
Yeah, there's just a time that you've had enough is enough. It's that thing, you stick your head out the window, you yell, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that's it. People who run, tell you what they stand for, and then they go down there, they're whips. And not all of them. Because there's disagreement. Good people can disagree. We all know good people disagree. But the folks you count on to be firm, to be tough, go down and negotiate away those things they promised that they wouldn't do.
So basically it's a matter of principle with you.
Well, yes, it is. And I got talked into it. There became an opening in LD 18, which then was LD 29 for the redistricting. And they came to me and asked me to run. And I said, guys, I'll help you find a candidate. But then I got thinking about it. And all the names that surfaced, I said, I want a fighter. I want somebody who's willing to do what they say and put their life on the line. And I don't want to overstate.
Well, that's what you're doing.
I get death threats.
Would you ever run for sheriff? Would you ever run for sheriff if the sheriff ever steps down?
The sheriff knows I've always had interest. I love law enforcement. Again, I've been in the sheriff's office 20
You were chief deputy.
years. I was chief deputy under Sheriff Joe. I've been a judge. I love the criminal justice system. I certainly would be more than tempting. First of all, it's family. I know those guys and gals. I love them. I consider myself a cop's cop. I believe that our job is out there 24/7, making sure we're finding the bad guys and putting them away.
So if the sheriff ever steps down, you would consider that?
I have have to be honest. If the sheriff ever stepped down, I probably would.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
Sheriff
good.
Joe and our friends. I have no intention of ever running against Sheriff Joe.
Be tough.
I work hard to keep him there. He's doing the right thing. He keeps his oath of office. He's doing what very few other folks are doing. In fact, the only sheriff in the state that's really doing what he does.
Well, you guys have a lot in common. You're both tough, and you stand for what you say, and you back it up. We're going to take a quick break, Russell, and I appreciate your being here in studio with us at KFNX. This is Dennis Wilenchik on Legalease, and we'll return to talk with Russell Pearce, President of the State Senate, in just a few minutes. This is Dennis Wilenchik, and we're back on Legalease. It's about 4:35 on a Wednesday, and we're here with State Senate President Russell Pearce talking about a lot of the things that he's involved in. Boy, the time goes by so quickly,
It does.
and there's so many things to talk about. But let me change the focus, and I apologize for interrupting here and there to do this, but let me change the focus to your experience when you were Chief Deputy in the jail system. I was just informed that today is the 18th or 19th? 18th anniversary of Tent City. And you were involved in that, weren't you?
I was very, very, very heavily. What happened, it's kind of an interesting story. And you're very familiar with this case. There was a decision made when Judge Mickey of the Ninth Circuit Court took personal pride in running jails across the country and defending, again, inmates. The only thing he didn't do is allow each one to have a barbecue outside of their cell door.
And by the way, for our listeners, all of that went up into the U.S. Supreme Court, where they basically said you're not supposed to micromanage the jails to all these federal judges.
Right. They did, because they were out of control.
Right.
And so anyway, what happened in Maricopa County is the jails went it cost the taxpayers millions of dollars because they decided to dictate jail space for inmates much better than our military have and so forth. And all of a sudden, our 8-man cells went to 4-man cells, and 4-man cells went to 2-man cells, and 2-man cells went to 1-man cells. And that just cut our jail capacity by court order in half. Not real capacity, but allowed capacity. And so then we had a bond election in Maricopa County in 91, and that bond election failed. And so as chief in 93, I told, again, two of my folks, Larry Witt and Tom Buchanan, because it was right after Desert Storm, and they were allowing the law enforcement to use the military surplus. And I said, I'd like to put up Tent City. I said, go see if we can't get some, because jails were not a part of that. Law enforcement was fighting crime and so forth, but jails not specific. So I sent them to the Pentagon. I said, I want you to go see the general. I want permission as a pilot to use that surplus. I want to put up a Tent City. We're not going to let people out. As long as I'm here, and as long as Sheriff Joe's here, I guarantee you, there'll never be a no vacancy sign out of Maricopa County. So I sent them. I got a call when they were there, and they said, wow, Russ, we're having a hard time. I said, I don't want to love you guys. Don't come home unless you have tents on the truck. And so we teased a little bit about it, and they did. They hung around for a couple of days, got the audience they needed, and we brought several truckloads of tents back. We built a tent city with inmate labor and correctional officers, detention officers. They're very proud of that. And my argument was always, first of all, these are all volunteers, as you know. Nobody goes there unless they willingly commit crime. So my issue is very simply, our soldiers live in tents, our Boy Scouts live in tents. I think inmates can survive in tents. We put up Tent City, saved Maricopa County taxpayers over $50 million at that initial stage, what it takes to build a brick-and-mortar facility for 1,000 inmates in 93. And of course, Sheriff Joe has expanded it a bunch since then, and continues to recognize its importance for not only image, but simply the right thing to do. County inmates are a little different than prisoners. They're short-termers. I think the average time right now for a jail inmate, unsentenced, I'm talking about, not unsentenced, is 23 days. So they're there for short term. They'll survive that very comfortably. And it saves the taxpayers millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Let me change the focus and ask you a little bit, Senator, about what the priorities are for you as well as the Senate and, frankly, the state over the next year.
Well,
what are you trying to accomplish?
Good question, because we've had a lot of successes. Here in this last year, again, a monumental year in my opinion. The governor agrees with that. We passed legislation on reforms in tweaking government and eliminating waste and fraud, balancing a budget, a tax package, the greatest tax package, relief package in the history of the state of Arizona, called a jobs package, putting Arizonans back to work, a huge package to create incentives for businesses to grow jobs. And again, that we're no longer the flyover zone for California. They're leaving California in droves. They'd like to have a place to land with like Arizona. And I'm not a believer in special tax breaks for certain business. I want all of Arizona to be what's called an enterprise zone. Lower taxes, lower regulation, the environment that's conducive to productivity, where government is not the impediment for growing jobs, but we're actually the partner by getting government out of the way. It's not our job to grow jobs. It's our job to create an environment that allows the private sector to grow jobs. And we're doing all we can. This next year, we're going to expand upon that. We're going to continue to push school choice, give parents the choice they need for their children to decide what is the best education for their child. We're going to continue to push public safety. We're going to continue, again, to work on those issues of waste and fraud all through government. We know we still have them. As much as we've done, we know that there's still a lot of places we need to visit to get government back under control the right way.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be challenged. We're going to do some personnel reform, and that's going to be a huge challenge. You know, just like the private sector, when you hire somebody, they're called at will. You know, we have great merit protection systems in state government that are inappropriate. It takes a long time to hire somebody. It takes even longer to fire somebody.
Well, then even if you fire somebody, you get problems firing them. So.
Right, and we don't fire good guys. That's what everybody wants to think, that this is fearful. It's hard to find good employees. Yeah. You don't fire good guys. But if you need to go, then you need to go.
Agency that pays them. You know, even when you contest people who should be fired, they pay them anyway.
Well, it takes. There are people on the payroll for over a year through the process while being paid. The process being terminated. That's wrong.
Or
that's
then they go to the EOC and they could claim too.
Yeah.
The whole system's out of control. No, it's true. The whole system's out of control. But let me ask you. You are, I know, having listened to other interviews, you are a proponent of the old Reagan saw that government shouldn't be the problem; it should be the solution, or something like that. Can't remember it exactly.
Yeah, his comments were, in today's times, government is not the solution. It is the problem.
And so how can government be the solution?
Again, very simple. We have a free market system that actually works. Our founders understood that. They put this system together. They never envisioned government the size the government is. And I've heard reports, and heard it on Fox News, heard the other day too, because it kind of reaffirmed what I'd been hearing, that it takes about 3 to 4 private sector jobs to pay for every public sector job. You can't afford to everybody work for government because taxpayers have to pay for all of that. So let's trim the size of government. And again, I'm a privatization kind of guy, where it makes sense. But if I can open up the phone book and there's companies and businesses that do that, then government probably ought not to be in that business to compete with them. And so that's my goal, is to see what we can do to get private, because private sector pay jobs, government, when they own land, they don't pay taxes on it. And so it just makes sense. And so our job, is very simply, is to get to lower taxes, lower regulation. I'm so frustrated when I talk to cities.
You got the power now to do it, because you've got a Republican government for change. You control the Senate. The legislature is controlled by the Republicans. There's no excuse really not to start pushing these things, right?
Yes, amen. If you can't do it now, you'll never get it done. Right. We have 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate that are Republicans, right, and a governor that all tell me how they're pro-business, limited taxes, lower taxes, limited government, want to undo some of the regulatory burdens that we place on businesses. Well, let's go talking. It's time to get it done.
All right, well, we're going to take a break shortly, but I am going to ask you, obviously, about 1070. We haven't really gotten into the heart of that. I'm going to ask you about the border fence when we come back, and I'm going to ask you about the Prop 200 litigation, where that is. And, of course, anything else you want to talk. We're talking to Russell Pearce, State Senator from District 18, President of the State Senate, and we'll be back after these commercial messages.
I'm a married man. I know how to take direction.
This is Dennis Wilenchik, and we're here on KFNX 1100. And speaking of which, let's talk about direction in the sense of Senate Bill 1070 while we're at it. My understanding was that nobody knows that law like you do. You wrote it, basically, right?
Well, I did. I had people I went to that I considered bright, bright constitutional attorneys, Chris Koback, who helped me tweak some things because we knew we'd be sued. Well, you've been there. We were sued on Prop 200, been to court 7 times. We were sued on employer sanctions, been to court 6 times.
Yeah.
Finally, a 5-3 decision in the United States Supreme Court. Great decision, not only because it was about going after illegal employers, it was about states' rights.
Yeah.
The ability of states to enforce their laws and protect their jobs, their citizens. I mean, and 1070 is headed the same direction.
Well, you know, while you're on that real quick, this preemption issue is the big issue. And that's the big one that the federal government loves to tout, right? Because that's what you're talking about.
It's interesting, and I hope Susan Bolton gets that appointment to the Ninth Circuit. She certainly has worked well with the Obama administration to get it with the ruling. It was all political. The Obama
I didn't even know there was an opening. So is there an opening?
They're not, but she's waiting.
Oh,
I
I see.
guarantee you.
Okay. Right.
Waiting in the wings.
Got it.
But you're right. This preemption issue is such a myth. Had Congress wanted, first of all, in just a little constitution, the states got together and created the federal government. Most people have forgotten that. The federal government works for the states. They gave them limited powers, enumerated powers, very limited.
I mean, the states gave the federal government limited power. Right.
They created the federal government.
Not the other way around.
No, they created the federal government. They said, here's all you can do in Articles 1, 2, and 3. And then to make sure that they had the Bill of Rights, and in the 10th Amendment they said, and to codify all of the powers belonging to the states and respectively we the people. It was, the states have the authority and the power. The states have never been preempted from enforcing the law. Regulation, now that's a different story. The federal government has the sole authority to regulate. Enforcement is not regulation.
And of course, interstate commerce, things of that nature that cross state lines.
Yeah, that's the most abused thing in the world. But the point is, if Congress had wanted to preempt the states, they would have used what are called their plenary powers. They have never done that. Absent that, the states have inherent authority, not delegated, inherent authority to enforce those laws. And this
seems like this is the big cop-out. Don't you think this is like the big cop-out? All these decisions are focused on that issue because it's an easy issue for them to cop out.
Well, yeah, and first of all, let's just take a logical step here with it. Had Congress, if the states really had been preempted, if we really didn't want local law enforcement to enforce the laws, why would you have 2 federal statutes, 8 U.S.C. 1644 and 8 U.S.C. 1373, that prevents the states from having sanctuary policies, prevents them from having policies that limit the enforcement of these laws? That's the first thing right there. It's pretty clear. They preempt the states from not
and
enforcing.
And it's really illegal to be in a state.
Yes.
And so if somebody is stopped, it seems logical to
we
anybody.
We arrest people on bank robbery every day, federal statutes, no protest there. We arrest guys on the federal gun statutes every day, no protest there. We arrest them on federal drug statutes every day, no protest there. But we protest this, and why? Because you've got 2 groups that have locked hands in the back door. The cheap labor advocates, those that I call the profits over patriotism crowd, who want cheap labor at all costs. And it's not cheap, it costs you not the taxpayer huge. And then you have the other side, the cheap vote side. And they want to change the political makeup of America. And they want to do that through demographics, and their best hope for that is open borders.
Now, there was a rumor, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that you wanted to actually argue the 1070 case.
Yeah, I understand they don't allow non-lawyers to do that, but I did. I know this law. I know the history
Must have
of
been
this law. I
frustrating
wrote
for you.
this law. I know the constitutional provisions. I know the debate going back to the creation of the federal government by the states from our founders. And the arguments are so clear. It's more about states' rights than it is anything else.
Yeah.
States have an inherent right to protect their citizens, to enforce the law. They've never been preempted.
Particularly where the federal government abdicates their responsibility.
Especially, that even adds merit to it when they have failed. And what is John Napolitano's response? To put up signs 30 miles from Phoenix, don't enter, too dangerous. That's her secure border answer. It's outrageous and embarrassing. And again, I mentioned earlier about Rob Kranz being murdered on the border during the debate of 1070. The 12 Phoenix police officers have been killed and maimed. I have a good heart. I'm not a mean guy, but how do you ignore the damage to this wonderful country?
Well, I think that's another thing. People are saying that that's a myth, that there really isn't that much crime, that there isn't that much of a problem caused by these folks, that there's no statistics to support that, et cetera, et cetera. What's your take on that?
Let me tell you real quickly. Since Arizona's been enforcing laws, let's just go back to Prop 106, or actually 07 employer sanctions that I wrote. And again, we just won the Supreme Court. I have to throw it in. I'm so proud of the Supreme Court for their standing for.
But that rested also on the specifics that the court held that Was that a preemption issue also?
It was.
Yeah.
And the court said not only do the states have a right, they have an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. Judge Roberts, who wrote the majority opinion, was so on. It was wonderful. But anyway, because it is about states' rights and states' obligation to their citizens. States are unlimited in their powers. It's our job to take care of our citizens. And the one job the federal government does have that they don't do well
but didn't he rule on
is
a very
secure the
narrow
border.
issue on that?
Did he what?
To uphold that? Didn't he come up with sort of a narrow issue? I'm trying to remember it now fully, but I thought he came up with a very narrow reason as to why he upheld that.
Well, he quoted
Something
some
in
of
the
the
statute itself.
Right. He quoted some of the statutes specifically that we put in. I give Chris Kobach great credit. He's the guy that said, we need to put this language in the bill also. I said, yeah, it makes sense. I liked it too.
And what was that?
Yeah, you got me. It was a phrase dealing with what we do, dealing with the preemption issue.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
And it was tied to the federal government, following the federal government, and allowing them to make final determination for purposes of deportation. See, we were not trying to tread on federal territory.
Right.
We have a right to arrest based on probable cause like any other crime. But the federal government or a 287G trained officer, which in essence is a federal officer, they can make final determination for purposes of deportation. So we were very careful how we worded this all the way, and are we grateful we did that, because that's exactly part of what he hung his hat on.
All right,
But I got to say something. Whenever
Yeah.
he talks about 1070, you'd think it was controversial, and it is with some folks. You'd think it was divisive, and it is with some folks. 3/4 of Americans support it from coast to coast. 30 states are running legislative vital after 1070. So who's it divisive with? The liberal media and the open border crowd who have no respect for our laws and ignore the damage to this wonderful country.
Yeah, well, that's usually the case, and they get all the press.
Yeah, they do.
I hear you. Yeah, the silent majority, of course, never gets heard. Let's turn to Prop 200. Well, but by the way, on 1070, what's your prediction on that?
It'll be the same as employer sanctions, House Bill 2779. It'll be I think we'll have a Keegan, I think she'll recuse herself again because she also was engaged in trying to stop this through some of her research in her previous assignment. That's why we had a 5-3 decision on employer sanctions, because she recused herself. I think she'll recuse herself again, but I think you have the same 5-3 decision in favor of TSA. We're not preempted. It enforces the law.
What about Prop 200? Tell our listeners what that's all about and what your involvement was. Of course, I was involved in the lower court trial of that, but tell our listeners what that's about.
Dennis, you get into it's so hard for me to tell a short story.
Well, let's just say this. It has to do with, obviously, the...
Three things.
Yeah.
And again, it started because Napolitano vetoed a bill to simply require ID at the polls.
Right.
So I gathered a little group of people in my office, 4 of us, and I said, we're going to go to the citizens. We're going to protect the integrity of our elections and protect the taxpayer. It was called the Arizona Citizens and Taxpayer Protection Act. And Prop 200, as is known. Protect Arizona Now. So anyway, we gathered signatures the old-fashioned way, hard work, labor, sweat, very little money. We did it with volunteers mostly, and then we had a little money at the end, thank heaven. We were really close to not making it.
But there, too, the bottom line to that law was simply that they have to show proof of identification.
Well, first of all, 3 things. Proof of citizenship to register to vote, something I think our founding fathers decided on a long time ago.
And that's done most of the time by a driver's license, 96% of the time, probably.
Yeah, it is, because in Arizona, you don't have to prove citizenship, but you have to prove legal presence to get an Arizona driver's license. But the second standard was ID at the polls, 2 forms of ID at the polls. After showing 2 forms of ID to get a blockbuster move, we thought voting ought to be on the same par. And then the third provision was no public benefits for those who are in this country illegally. I mean, you're in the country illegally, you can't take advantage of the taxpayer. Governor Napolitano and Terry Goddard did a backdoor veto on that, refused to implement Section 6 of Prop 200 on the public benefits side. And it was a battle, and it continued to be. We've been upheld through the courts. Now we've got a little bit of a problem at the 9th. Senator Dare Connor, our own, who doesn't believe protecting the integrity of our elections is worth it. I'm embarrassed and saddened by that ruling. It was a 2-3 ruling. It was not unanimous.
No, I argued that in front of her for the counties.
Well, it was bad. I never expected that out of her.
So, and who knows where that's going to go, right? I mean, it's
I hope it goes to the Supreme Court, because I think we'll win that too.
But the Court of Appeals has now got it in bank, and they haven't done anything with it.
Right, and that's the problem. It's going to linger there for a while, and we know that. That's why we made the special appeal on 1070, because we knew it lingered for 2 years in the Ninth Circuit Court or more. We knew we were going to be at the Supreme Court anyway. Well, let's go now. Let's get right up there and get it done. And that's what should have been done with Prop 202. So that's true.
Let me ask you a tough question before we take our next break, which is probably our last break as I look at the clock. Is there anything your opponents say about you that you agree with or can concede may be true? Tough question.
Well, it is tough because, they have an opinion. I don't want to demean folks because good people can disagree, but I'm disappointed because, when you are advocating for those who write the law, and the real issue is 1070, and there's other issues too, but the others are complete myths. The one thing that I think, and they're staying away from 1070, that was the issue that started this whole thing. They started the recall 3 weeks after I was elected as president of the Senate. Has nothing to do with performance. In fact, this recall is based on the fact I kept my promises. The things they're trying to recall me on are the things that I promised my district I would do, and we did.
Well, I got to say, for the record, I agree with you. I think if people want somebody out of office, they can vote at the voting booth.
Yeah, and get the nomination from their party as required.
Otherwise, it's a big waste of money and time for everybody. Russell Pearce, we've been delighted to have you on board here on Legalease. I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back in the future.
Anytime.
And when we see what happens to some of these, laws and whether they're upheld or not. And thank you for being here. This is Dennis Wilenchik on Legalease. We'll see you next Wednesday, or I guess we won't see you, but you'll hear me next Wednesday from 4 to 5 before Lou Dobbs. And thanks again, Russell. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you
care.
much.
Be good.
Thank you. God bless.